Thank you very much. Welcome everyone. 12:03. We're calling today's beer board meeting to order. First matter of business is I'm going to call roll to verify that we do have a quorum for today's meeting. Ms. Jarman.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Bellamy. Mr. Conway. Mr. Perlin.
Here.
Ms. Spalding.
Here.
Ms. Fox.
Here.
Very good. I have five in attendance today. Next on the agenda will be to, if I can, I'll ask the legal counsel, Mr. Garth, to give us a rundown on why we are still allowed to have these meetings in this medium.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This meeting is permitted to be held in an electronic format under the Governor's Executive Order 16 as continued in its current iteration under Executive Order 78, so long as the board determines that the business conducted by the board is essential business. As such, I would recommend that a motion be made that the business before the board is essential business, but the board chooses to meet in an electronic format, and that all board rules and regulations to the contrary be waived.
Very well. To the board, you heard Mr. Garth. I'll entertain a motion to approve his recommendation.
So moved.
A motion, do I have a second?
Second, this is Bailey Spalding.
Thank you. Any comments, discussion? Hearing none, as I call your name, I'll entertain your vote on the motion to hold today's meeting via this WebEx platform, and that it is essential for business. Ms. Jarman.
Yay.
Mr. Perlin.
Yay.
Ms. Spalding.
Yay.
Ms. Fox.
Yay.
I have 4 yeas, no nays. Motion passes. Mr. Garth, thank you very much. Next, I will read a memo regarding appeals of the beer board decisions. If you're not satisfied with the decision of the Metropolitan Beer Permit Board regarding your application or your hearing, you may appeal the decision to the Davidson County Chancery or Circuit Court pursuant to the requirements set forth in TCA 57-5-108. The decisions of the Metro Beer Permit Board take effect on a date to be determined by the board. However, you may file an appeal within 60 days of the date of entry of the board's decision. We advise that you seek your own independent legal advice to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements have been met. Next on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the previous meeting. I'll entertain a motion to do so.
So moved.
Motion, I need a second.
Second, Joe Perlin.
A motion, a second. Any discussion, amendments, edits? Hearing none, as I call your name, I'll entertain your vote on the motion to approve the minutes. Ms. Jarman.
Yay.
Mr. Perlin.
Yay.
Mrs. Spalding.
Yay.
Ms. Fox.
Yay.
Thank you very much. 4 yeas, no nays, motion passes. Director McDonough, will you please help me keep an eye out in the event that Mr. Bellamy or Mr. Conway do join us at today's meeting? Just let me know. That way we can note their attendance.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is approval of applications based on Beer Permit Board staff. They recommend that we grant the following. Number 3, East Nashville Beer Works, LLC, East Nashville Beer Works. 4, Flat Tire Diner, LLC, Flat Tire Diner. 5, Ploy Glau, LLC, Sushi Thai. 6, Sonesta International Hotels Corporation, Sonesta Nashville Airport. 7, Jackalope Brewing Company, LLC, Jackalope Brewing Company. 8, Len's, LLC, Locust. 9, Blue Stripes Gulch, LLC, Blue Stripes Cocoa Shop. 10, GB Nashville, LLC, the Gumbo Brothers. 11, GB Nashville LLC, the Gumbo Brothers, that's delivery curbside. Number 12, GB Nashville LLC, the Gumbo Brothers, that's caterer. 13, Walls LLC, Lavert's Market. 14, the Rock and Dough Pizza Company LLC, the Rock and Dough Pizza Company. 15, Taqueria La San Marquena, Taqueria La San Marquena. 16, Three Amigos Bar and Hookah Lounge LLC, Three Amigos Bar and Hookah Lounge. 17, OM Randall Oil Group Inc., OM Randall Oil Group. Staff recommendation is to grant those permits. I'll entertain a motion from the board to do so.
So moved.
Second, Joe Perlin.
Thank you, Mr. Jarman. Mr. Perlin, any discussion?
This is Bailey Spalding. I think I'm supposed to abstain because Jackalope, our delivery curbside is on there, so that would be a conflict for me.
Very well.
So just let's get that out there.
Thank you. Let the record show that Ms. Spalding is abstaining from voting on number 7 due to conflict of interest. Thank you, Ms. Spalding. All those in favor of the motion to grant as requested and approved by the motion, as I call your name, I'll entertain your vote. Ms. Jarman.
Yay.
Mr. Perlin.
Yay.
Ms. Spalding.
Yay.
Ms. Fox.
Yay.
4 yeas, no nays, motion passes. And again, note for the record, Ms. Spalding's abstention from number 7 on the agenda. Following applications based on staff recommendations shall be deferred indefinitely. Understand that if you are one of the following names that I call, because the staff or because the board potentially may defer these indefinitely, understand that once you submit all your necessary required documents, staff does have the opportunity and ability to issue temp permits once they have attained and are satisfied with those documents. So based on staff recommendations, the following shall be deferred indefinitely should the board so approve. Number 18, Asako Corporation, Samurai Sushi East. 19, Boston Commons LLC, Boston Commons. Number 20, the Metropolitan Nashville Airport Authority, Nashville International Airport. 21, 10 South Distillery LLC, Big Machine Brewery and Distillery. 22, Alive Hospice Inc., Alive and the Bluebird. And number 23, GBLL Holdings LLC, Go Puff number 394. I'll entertain a motion to defer those indefinitely.
So moved.
Second, Fox.
Thank you, ladies. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? As I call your name, I'll entertain your vote on the motion for indefinite deferral. Ms. Jarman.
Yay.
Mr. Perlin.
Yay.
Ms. Spalding.
Yay.
Ms. Fox.
Yay.
4 yeas, no nays. Motion passes. Those are deferred. Next on the agenda are complaints. Unless there is one specifically or any specifically that a board member wishes to pull for discussion, I will read the permit holder and the staff recommended civil penalty citation. Number 24, Sami Nassif Lewis, Star Market. Staff recommended penalty is $2,000. 25, Suze Shamshun Bashir, Nashville Discount Tobacco, $1,500 of the penalty. 26, Keshav Oil Inc., Express Mart, $2,000. 27, Family Dollar Stores of Tennessee Inc., Family Dollar Store number 22627, $2,000. 28, Flag Store LLC, Flag Store Market and Vape, $1,500. 29, R&R Drive-In Market Inc., R&R Drive-In Market, $2,500. 30, Jack Brown's Joint, Germantown LLC, Jack Brown's Beer and Burger Joint, $2,500. 31, Vu's Kitchen, Germantown LLC, Vu's Kitchen, Germantown, $2,500. 32, Steam Boys LLC, Steam Boys, $3,000. 33, Waldo's Chicken, Germantown LLC, Waldo's Chicken, Germantown, $1,500. 34, Mapco Express, 3416. Mapco Express, 3416. Staff recommendation is $1,000. 35, Mapco Express Inc., Mapco number 3065, $1,000. 36, Jow Gaia Tree Inc., Bud's Curb Market, $1,500. 37, Slim and Husky's Pizza, Slim and Husky's Pizza, $2,500. 38, BCS Metro Lodging LLC, Holiday Inn Express, $2,500. 39, TriStar Energy LLC, Hightail number 8897, $1,000. Number 40, Mapco Express Inc., Mapco number 3338, $1,000. Number 41, Haywood Shell Station, $2,500. Unless there is one that a board member wishes to pull out to discuss individually, I'll entertain a motion to issue citations as read to those.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I was going to let you know that Mr. Bellamy just joined us.
Very well. Welcome, Mr. Bellamy. Again, I'll entertain a motion to issue those citations as read.
So moved.
Second, Joe Perlin.
Second. Thank you very much. Any discussion? Hearing none, as I call your name, I'll entertain your vote on the motion to issue those citations as read. Mr. Harmon.
Yay.
Mr. Bellamy. I'll circle back. Mr. Perlin.
Yay.
Ms. Spalding.
Yay.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Ms. Fox.
Yay.
And Mr. Bellamy, back to you. All right, I see thumbs up on the screen. Thank you. 5 yeas, no nays, the motion passes. Next on the agenda this evening, we've got a few trials that were deferred from previous dates. It's a little bit different. We generally don't have trials on our day meetings, but due to the volume and the nature of the times we're in, we are today. So we do have our court reporter with us.
Brian, I'm having a little trouble hearing you at times. I don't know if you're not next to your microphone or sometimes
Right,
I can.
I've got an earpiece in, so that may be. I'll try to speak up.
That's good right there.
All right, very good. Sorry about that. So we're just going to take them in order on today's agenda.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I was just going to make the board aware that we provided a formal hearing summary that should have come in the, I believe it was the fourth email or the very last email you all received today. And the numbers on there, I believe, are incorrect because I have them as 36, 37, and 38. So just disregard those numbers. But everything else, there's a summary for each case, along with the witnesses, the applicable law, the history, and the original staff recommendation.
All right, very well. Thanks, Director.
Thank you.
So first on the agenda today is Punjab Inc., Quick Sack number 625. Benton, do we have the individuals that will be speaking and or Mr. Bowen, the attorney?
Actually, we have, I believe it's Mr. Clabo, Jacob Clabo, that is representing them today. He is a partner.
Very well. Mr. Clabo, say something else.
Can you hear us?
Yes, you sound very distant, but we can hear you.
Let me see if I can turn the microphone up.
Sure. And who will be speaking on this matter on behalf of the beer board?
That'll be me, James.
Inspector James, was that you? All right, thank you. Okay, so Mr. Clabo, the first question I'm going to have for you, the only question I have at the moment is just, is your plea in this matter, is it guilty or not guilty?
I can't hear you.
Is your plea today guilty or not guilty?
We're going to plead guilty.
All right. Thank you. We'll be right back to you. I would ask at this point, Susan, if you would swear in all those that will be speaking today. Mr. Clabo, if any of your clients will be speaking, we will need those to be sworn in.
I'm sorry, Mr. McDonough, we can't hear you on our end.
Okay. Susan, can you hear me okay? You're muted, so. Or Director, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
I can't hear you. You went back to what it was.
All right. Well, I'll see if I can adjust it in just a moment. Again, Mr. Clabo, what I was saying is that if any of your clients will be speaking today, we will need those sworn in.
Okay.
Susan?
And you all raise your right hands, please. Those who are going to testify. Do you all solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Then we'll start today this trial. We're going to hear from Inspector James first.
Yes, sir. This is Inspector James. So this was a controlled beer buy check. This location was on our list for the day. It was December 28th, 2020. That was a Monday. So during the compliance check, we used 2 decoy minors. One was a female, age 19. The other was a male, age 19. Both minors entered the location and consecutively were able to purchase beer from this location. The clerk did check both IDs, but did not. We still went through with the sale. So the minors exited the location with the beer and the change, and like we always do, I took the beer and the change and went inside and returned the beer and the change for the marked $20 bills. And at that time, I went ahead and wrote the report. Really, I don't have anything else. If you have any questions, but that's it for now.
Okay, very well. Thank you.
Mhm.
Mr. Clabo, we will hear from you now.
Thank you, sir. Can you hear us a little bit better now?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. I turned the microphone up, so hopefully that'll be helpful.
Great.
I guess, and correct me if I'm wrong, am I allowed to ask any questions of Mr. James?
Yes, sir, you are.
So, and this is going to be pretty brief. Mr. James, do you have a copy of the agenda in front of you for today's hearing?
Yes, sir. I have the staff recommendation.
Okay. Well, does your copy show the prior violations for this establishment?
Yes, sir.
And so were you involved in any of the prior sale to minors at this establishment?
I believe that I was on those operations.
Okay.
I believe that Inspector Hardrick did the previous 3 reports, so he's the one that actually went inside and and did the transaction, or did return the beer and did the report.
Okay.
But I do believe I was present for those.
Gotcha. Well, the reason I asked Mr. James is So Punjab doesn't contest that there were prior violations, but we did have a question about the dates of those violations. In particular, the third one on the list is January of 21. And we think that might be a 2020 violation.
Yes, so those dates you see on that agenda, I believe that's the date that it actually went before the board. So that's not the date that the violation occurred.
Okay.
The date, one that is presented before the board today, occurred on December 28th. In fact, the one previous before that was December 23rd.
Okay, and that's what I was wanting to ask. And you were involved in that you participated in that sale as well.
I'm not on the report, but I do believe that I was on that operation that day.
Okay. And were those the same two miners that you all used in the December 28th sale?
I'd have to go back and check my email if you give me a minute.
That's all I've got right now, Chairman.
Okay, very well.
You need that information because we have several different miners that we use, and they're not the same every operation. So.
Okay. Well, Mr. Chairman, I think that's all I have in terms of questions for Mr. James.
Okay.
My clients here, and I'll introduce them very briefly, were subpoenaed. Mr. Ashok Kumar is the owner of the location. Sitting behind him, I'm not sure how well y'all can see him, is Mr. Sarath Sengupta. He's the manager for the location. And then sitting behind me is Michael Edward White. He was the clerk who was working the counter on December 28th. And they're here for any questions that you all might have. Like I said at the beginning, we're pleading guilty. The guys know that they messed up, and they've since then are in the process of taking several remedial steps to try to ensure that this doesn't happen again. And I can go into that in more detail if the board would like me to do so.
Okay. Does that complete your comments for the moment, Mr. Clabo?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Now I'll open it up to the board for any questions of Inspector James or Mr. Clabo or his clients.
This is Bailey Spalding. I would be interested in hearing the detail. It seems like there were several violations over a short period of time. So I'd be interested in hearing the detail you were referring to as to how to make sure this doesn't continue to happen.
Yes, Ms. Spalding. And so Mr. Kumar's owned the location since 2006. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Sarath, you've managed it since 2011 or 2012?
That's correct.
And so since that time period, underage sales of minors has not been a consistent problem with their location. And they are, I guess, located right across from Vanderbilt University on West End. We're all familiar with it for that. But it's been here recently that they've had the string of sales. Going forward, there's a couple different things they've done. Sarath started training the clerks on how to properly check IDs, as as the inspector noted, the ID was checked at the time. They've also are investing in some scanners to physically scan the driver's licenses of the patrons as they come in to make sure that this type of thing doesn't happen in the future. The reason I was asking about the dates previously is, there was a string of incidents towards the end of last year, but into, I guess, almost 3 subsequent months. There have not been any infractions. And in fact, Mr. Sengupta, I believe one time did, and you might be able to tell the story better than I can, there was another check subsequent to the December 28 check in which they caught the underage patrons trying to buy beer. And I guess the last thing I'll add in terms of the situation that's before the board today is that Mr. White is not typically a clerk at the store who usually does sanitation. And that day they had some issues with staffing, and he was behind the counter, and so he's not usually the person who is back there selling anything or checking IDs. which is one of the sources of the issues before the board today.
All right. Ms. Foley, any follow-up on that?
No, thank you.
Very well. To the rest of the board, are there any other questions, again, for Mr. Claybo, his clients, or Inspector James? All right, hearing none. I will reiterate the permit holder did plead guilty, therefore there is no need to sustain the citation. If the board so pleases, we can move to penalty phase. At this point, I would entertain a motion for penalty for quick sack. 625 on today's agenda. Before we do that, Mr. Claybo, let me refer to you. Do you have any additional comments or questions? I apologize.
Yes, sir. Well, I think that, the only thing we have left to say is that in terms of the penalty, my guys they want to do the right thing. They've been very forthcoming and trying to participate with the board. I know this was a deferred trial. There was an issue with, I guess, subpoenaing one of the parties for last month's hearing. So we apologize for that, but nevertheless, our guys have been very forthcoming, and they're trying to take all the steps they can to remediate the issue to make sure going forward it's not an ongoing concern. And for those reasons, our guys would respectfully request that the board issue, obviously, a civil fine in lieu of suspension or revocation, or to give us a short suspension.
Okay. Does that conclude your comments?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Thank you, Mr. Claybo. To the board, again, I'll say if there are no questions, then we've still got a moment if someone needs to ask a question. Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion on penalty. Not everyone at once.
This is Chris Bellamy. I just want to make sure it's correct. The staff recommendation was a 30 days.
I can't hear.
Yeah, Mr. Bellamy, we can barely hear your voice.
All right, this is better or no?
It's a little better, not a ton better.
All right, well, I'll refrain from commenting until I can get my microphone working correctly.
All right. Any other comments? Again, I'll entertain a motion for penalty for this permit.
This is Joe Perlin. I'll make a motion, 30-day suspension. Or, I'm sorry, 30-day suspension. What did the recommendations from the beer board were? I've gone blank.
It's a 30-day with a 180-day probation. That was the staff recommendation.
I'll make a motion, 30-day probation. No, 30-day suspension, 180-day probation.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second? A second for the motion to move forward. Hearing no second. Without a second, the motion will fail.
Again, sorry, I was trying to find my spot on the page. I'm back with you on number 36.
Okay. I'm still open to a motion on penalty for quick sack number 625.
This is Bailey Spalding. I actually have a question. This is the first since I've been on the board where we're discussing a suspension with no option of a penalty. I guess my question to the chairman or director would be, in situations like this before, have we ever given an option to basically a penalty or a payment option as well? Sorry if that made any sense at all.
I'll answer from my perspective. Historically, generally the first 2, maybe even 3 violations, particularly with regard to sale to minor, there is a civil penalty, a dollar civil penalty offered, with an option to choose at the permittee discretion a suspension in lieu of that penalty. At some point, be it either violation number 3 or beyond, keeping in mind that it's the board's discretion on any violation on what penalty we issue, regardless of whether it's first, second, third, fourth, or more, and regarding the violation. Statutorily, you can only fine up to $2,500 for a sale to minor for that specific violation. Again, there have been cases in the past where after a number of sale to minor violations, we have issued suspensions. There have been cases that we have issued options with a civil penalty. Again, it's just dependent upon the situation. As as chair, I would always advise that, and I believe that we take every situation under its own merits. I hope that answers your question, Mr. Spalding.
I have one more question as a follow-up from that. So were you saying the maximum, if we gave an option for a dollar amount civil penalty, the maximum option would be $2,500, or would it be $5,000 given that there were 2 separate minors?
Statutorily on a sale to minor action, as it's presented to us, it's $2,500 for the violation. I'm not aware that for a sale, even though it's 2 minors, I'm not aware of a situation where we've ever issued a citation for $5,000 because there were 2 at the same time. In this case, and you will see, and I'll let the director opine on this in a moment, that there have been cases where it's been more than $2,500. Generally, that is a sale to minor violation on top of either an ID check or the lack of an ID check or some other violation discovered during the same time period or same activity by the inspectors. Mr. Director, do you want to add to that or make any corrections that I may have misstated?
No, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
I think you stated it all perfectly. I mean, we statutorily cannot go above 2,500 per violation, but typically if we have a situation where they sold to a minor and then didn't check an ID, like we would assess over 2,500 because there's an additional violation in that case. Now, the recommendation that we make, this is typically what we would recommend on a fourth sale to a minor, but it is a recommendation, and it's up to the board to determine, what they believe the best course of action is in this case. As the attorney stated, they're taking steps to remedy this, and you can add any number of things into your final vote for them to follow, or if you want them to come back in in one meeting and see how things are going at that point. We've done that before, where we had a situation last year, the year before, where we had a respondent that we suspended for 6 months, and then the board, I believe, had them come back before the board for an update to see how things were going with their business. So really, we have the initial recommendation that we make, and then it's really up to the board to either take that recommendation or shape it the way that they feel is proper in that situation.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's really helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, this is Fox. May I make a comment as well, please?
Sure.
Okay, so as I'm looking here, we've got 1, 2, 3 offenses already, selling to minors. We've got a number 4, which occurred December 28th. They did check IDs and they still sold. So, and then of course, staff recommendation, 3rd-day suspension, 180-day probation. It's critical that we take into consideration the prior, and it's critical that the business understands, what they're doing here. How it dominoes when you sell to a minor and they walk out that door, and what can happen. It's important to understand that. To me, it's seeing that, they're wanting to make changes, of course, which is critical to do when you hire someone and there is employee training. The workplace training that needs to that needs to happen to understand what you're dealing with when you're dealing with the public. So this is critical here, I believe. So we got to, I guess, tread, because it does affect the business, I believe. 30-day suspension. So in order to put that on paper and say 30-day suspension, coming back and saying midway and looking at it and saying, did they do the training? Did they, are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? To me, it's just that. It's just making sure that we bring in a penalty that wakes them up and says, hey, this is not going to happen again, no matter what. So it stands for 30-day suspension and 180-day probation.
So is that, are you making that in the form of a motion? Which followed suit to Mr. Perlin's motion a moment ago.
I am putting it in front of the board, the rest of my board, and saying, is it not critical to bring in the priors to understand what's happening here? It's tough for a business, but I think we can go less than that and then come back, and then is it to where it's open, where we can say it's not happening and do something different?
Mr. Chairman, this is counsel for the gas station. Can I be heard on this issue?
Sure, Mr. Claybo. I'll give you a moment.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I've been on mute for a second talking to my clients. you know, obviously, you know, it's a gas station convenience store. Beer sales are a huge part of their business, and they recognize that if they lose that ability, you know, whether it's via suspension or via revocation, that's going to have a substantially adverse impact on their business. And that's a big stick, Mr. Chairman, that this board had and they're very cognizant of that. But I was listening a moment ago to your discussion of molding or shaping a penalty to kind of match the crime. I think in this situation, having them come back or having a probationary period and maybe a deferred suspension if they don't, you know, go through the remedial steps that I talked about previously, would be something they'd be open to, you know, because they do take this seriously, and you know it's not going to happen again. They don't want it to happen again. And so I think our 2 cents would be, you know, this is the 4th time. You know, I think there is the remediating fact, or there is the mitigating fact that the 4th sale wasn't done by a typical clerk. It was done by a person who's not usually behind the counter. But nevertheless, you know, moving forward, we don't think it's going to be an issue. So our guys are more than happy and more than willing to come back before this board, whether it's next month or in 3 months or what have you, and give a status report. And we don't believe there'll be any issues in the intervening time. And so from our perspective, you know, that's something we're absolutely open to.
Mr. Chair, this is Chris. I'm sorry, sir. This is Chris Bellamy. May I offer a second to Mr. Perkins' motion for the staff recommended penalty, and then offer a comment?
In my opinion, that motion he made earlier failed due to no second. So I would say is, if you want to discuss a motion, to make a motion, let's get a second, and then we can go from there.
That makes sense. So I would like to move that we accept the staff recommendation of a 30-day suspension with 180-day probation.
Second.
Who seconded that, please?
Kia Jarman.
Thank you. It's okay. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Bellamy.
So for me, and I appreciate Mrs. Fox's deliberation on this and struggling with this, and understanding that, you know, you take away beer sales from a business such as theirs, there's an impact there, and as there should be. And when I look at the history and what has occurred, what it appears to me is that they've said, you know what, paying these penalties, we've done a cost benefit analysis, and if we get caught, is worth the penalty to continue to sell to minors. That's what it appears to me. And you know, I'm an attorney, and I have a case right now where a young man and his friends, who are all minors, got in an accident, and one of the passengers in the vehicle lost his life, and the driver's now been charged with vehicular homicide. And there's no witness in this entire case. And so I do take this very seriously. And I actually think a 30-day suspension is them getting off light in this particular case.
Very well. Any other comments on the motion or discussion on the motion? So I have a motion. I have an appropriate second for a 30-day suspension followed by 180-day probation. The one other comment I may add, just as factual commentary, is that for the board and for anyone who's on this call or has any kind of interaction with the beer board, is that staff, they do perform training exercises for permit holders. Obviously it would be scheduled, but staff does have that in their tool belt. So I would ask the board just to keep some of that stuff in mind. But to that point, I have a motion of 30-day suspension followed with 180-day probation. Is there any additional discussion on that motion? Hearing none. Did someone need to speak? All right. Hearing none, as I call your name, I'll entertain your vote on that motion. Ms. Jarman.
Yay.
Mr. Bellamy.
Yay.
Mr. Curlin.
Yay.
Ms. Spalding.
Yay.
Ms. Fox.
Yay.
5 yeas, no nays on the motion. Mr. Claybo, as you have just witnessed, the board has issued a penalty in the form of a 30-day suspension along with 180-day probation for your clients. Due to suspension, that generally, or that means that you will not be able to sell beer for a period of 30 days. That period must start within, I believe it's either the next 7 or 14 days, but staff will be in touch with you either this afternoon or tomorrow to discuss how that process works and when that process can begin. It's generally, you don't have to have the product removed. It just has to be locked up out of access of the staff and or the public. That's a conversation and some communications that you will have with the staff. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Very well. Thank you guys so much. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for your time.
You bet. Thanks so much. Okay, next on the agenda is 43 on the agenda, Amal Amina, Jerry's Sitco.
They are on the call.
Who is here on behalf of Jerry's Sitco? Jerry's Sitco. Is there the attorney Cleveland Bain, Amal Mina, or Wild Caldes?
I think they're still on mute. There we go. Oh.
I still need to hear from someone regarding someone on behalf of Jerry Sitco. Director, can you help us out figuring out which is which and if they are or aren't muted?
They are listed under participants. If Dontre, if we can get them unmuted.
Okay, is there, I see that someone was just, folks were just unmuted. Is there someone for Jerry Sitco?
Can you all hear me now?
Yes, who's speaking, please?
This is Cleveland Bain, the attorney for Jerry Sitco.
Sir, Mr. Bain, thank you. We can't hear you.
Okay, I also have Miss Maina, the owner, and then Bassem Farag on the call, who's the manager. Can you all hear them as well?
I'm not here.
Yes.
Okay, sounds good. We can't hear them. Thanks, Mr. Bain. Mr. Bain, my first question for you is, how do your clients plead today, guilty or not guilty?
We are initially going to plead not guilty.
Okay. So before we start, Susan, will you please swear in the folks? Mr. Bain, just so you understand, if your clients or anyone on your client's behalf is planning to speak today, they will need to be sworn in. And also, who is speaking on behalf of the beer board today?
That would be Mr. Hardrick.
Mr. Hardrick, are you with us? Mr. Hardwick, are you there? I see that you may still be muted.
Can you hear me?
We can now. Thank you.
Hello?
Susan?
All right.
Yeah, we can hear you, Mr. Hardwick. Susan?
Okay. Will you all raise your right hands, please? Be sworn. Do you all solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Yes, we do.
Yes. Yes.
Great. Thank you very much. We're going to start by hearing from Mr. Hardwick today.
Good afternoon to the board, to the attendees. This incident took place on October the 20th at the location 3900 Clarksville Pike, where we were completing and conducting a compliance check on this location. The location was cited for 2 violations. The first violation being selling to a minor, where we did send in an undercover minor who was able to purchase alcohol from this location. And once the minor gave me the signal and I entered the location, identified myself as a Metro beer inspector. Once behind the counter, if you can see the screen, I took notice of 4 packs of Newports that were ripped from the middle. I also submitted pictures in the file. At that point, I cited the location for TCA 3917-1508, which is under required packaging from the state of Tennessee, and the law reads as following. It is unlawful for any person to sell cigarettes or smokeless tobacco products except in its original form, sealed, package, in which they were placed by the manufacturer that bears the health warning required by federal law. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Hardwick. Mr. Bain, I'll open the floor to you.
Thank you. So we're a little handicapped today because the actual clerk who was cited is unavailable, and he has been unavailable. I've tried to get in touch with him, and there's also a request for a subpoena be issued, but we have since found out through the manager that he has COVID and has actually been hospitalized. So we were unable to have the actual clerk here. However, Bossum, Mr. Farag, who's the manager of the store, had an opportunity to speak with him, and I guess this would be the question to the inspector. Our clerk was adamant that that the person who came in to purchase the beer was older, like significantly older. But I understand, from what the inspector said, that it was a minor, so maybe we could just get some type of clarification or response on that.
Is that question to me, Inspector Hardwick?
Yes.
Okay, sir. We only use minors, and in fact, the minors that we use, by the law of the state of Tennessee, those minors use their own IDs. They are not allowed to lie to you about their age. And in this case, the minor had a red box around their ID that specifically said under 21.
Was the ID ever issued or presented?
Yes, sir. The ID is always presented. That's where we can differ if we're going to cite you for checking the ID or no ID check. The ID is always presented.
And
So
I guess go ahead, I'm sorry.
So there is any video can prevent it to us or picture for the minors?
Who's speaking, please?
Hey, Bossum, you're going to have to get sworn in. That's Mr. Farag. You're going to have to get sworn in before you say anything.
If you'll raise your right hand, Mr. Farrar.
Yes.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
So they have any video or type any verification to show to us for the minor?
Mr. Farrak, we do not have any video for this particular incident, but I did not charge you for no ID check, so the ID was looked at. I won't say it was checked, but it was looked at.
So, like, I need evidence because when I spoke to him, he swear he was telling me I did it. I know he looks over 50 years old.
No, sir. I can give you my word as a beer inspector. We don't use anyone that looks anywhere over 50. We use 19-year-olds, 18-year-olds, in some cases, 20-year-olds. We haven't used a 17-year-old, but nobody that looks over 50.
Do you have any approved?
I mean, I can sit here and show you the file that I put together, but if you're asking for proof against my word as an inspector, then no, I'm not gonna have that kind of stuff.
And I think you understood. What we're trying to say is we were kind of in a situation here is like, as the manager coming in and like someone and understand like maybe he was just saying that because he was cited, but so
Right.
that's one of the reasons why we've requested a hearing and we've tried to kind of flesh this out a little bit because he was so adamant about the age and the appearance. But I understand, that the inspector is not going to misrepresent something to the board, and that's not what we were alleging. With that being said, I would transition and let the board know that person is no longer an employee of the store, and even though he was adamant, that he didn't make any violations, we have made some policy changes, like including the incorporation of like ID scanners, so the IDs are scanned, via the barcode instead of the manual inspection. And then I guess the second issue here would be the cigarettes, and Mr. Darby was kind enough to provide the pictures and things like that from the inspector. I do see where the boxes, and obviously the board could see like where the boxes are open, but the thing that I noticed is that there's no cigarettes missing, like they're all full. So while
Can I say something real quick?
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say, Mr. Harder, please, if you would, let Mr. Bain finish until.
I don't know if I can actually open this packet, but there's, if you can see, can you see the evidence that I'm holding up in front of the camera?
Yes, sir.
All right. The 4 packs, you got four packs in a single cigarette, and you're absolutely right. The 4 packs, well, the 3 packs and the one back here in the corner, they are not open. This one cigarette came from the pack that he had already sold the majority of the cigarettes out of. So instead of saying I have 5 packs of cigarettes, I noticed 5 packs of cigarettes, I got 4 full packs of cigarettes that are torn to be sold as singles. And I took the last single out of the pack of cigarettes that he was selling while I was on site.
Oh, so you're saying there was like an additional? There were 5 total packs.
Yes, sir. There were 5 total packs, but once we got on site, he had already sold that 5th pack down to 1 cigarette. So instead of putting that whole pack in there, I just took the single cigarette out of the pack and left the pack on the counter. and logged it as evidence.
And it's my understanding, and can you confirm, Inspector, that there has been no, there's been no citations or issues with this cigarette packaging at this location prior to this event?
Not prior, not that I can attest to right here in the trial, but no.
Well, with those questions, I would just submit to the board, you know, on the ID issue. You know, we have tried to remedy this issue. Like I said, that the clerk has been adamant. I mean, the board can clearly make a decision, you know, to weight and credibility on that, and we'll accept that. But I would also like to note that even though he was adamant about that, we did go ahead and implement additional safeguards, like one, the ID scanners, and then I believe Mr. Farrak has taken a more on-hands approach, like with the training and the clerks, and reiterating the importance of, you know, scanning them, making sure that that it is over 21, and then with the issue of the cigarettes, I have a jurisdictional question on that, like whether, you know, but maybe the Department of Agriculture is in charge, you know, or the Commissioner of Agriculture is in charge of those citations. But with that aside, you know, since there has been no previous issues about the packaging, the statute says that on the first offense, like, there should be a warning, and so I would just respectfully submit that, you know, we've made it clear about the packaging issue, and that we just adhere to the statute there, and it'd be a warning.
All right.
May I ask something?
Who's speaking?
Yeah. May I add something regarding the loose cigarettes?
Who is? Yes, sure, but please state your name.
So, when I asked Mr. Galdas regarding the loose cigarette, he told me exactly this cigarette was old and was opened by the sales rep, because this old cigarette, and he opened it. So he wanted to make sure none of them was sold. As you seen, there is all 4 of them was full, not even one sold of it. So this cigarette was old. Probably the one was out. He was talking about it. He was showing to him it has a dust on it. You know, when they start the cigarette, they push it all the way to the back, not stiff, like to do like rotation, like whatever, first in, first last out. So they do it like they pushed it all the way. When the cigarette wrap comes in the store, he found those cigarettes out of dates and expired from the previous owner, and or whatever. I don't know where the cigarette came from, and he opened it. So the guy, he doesn't want to throw it away until he provided it to the owner.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Hardrick.
Mr. Farrak, I have no doubt that your employee told you that.
Mr. Hardrick, also, Mr. Hardrick, may I remind you, if you would address the board with your comments, not necessarily directly to Mr. Farrak, if you would. And thank you.
That's fine. I apologize, Mr. Chairman. To the board, as an inspector and as a former smoker, as you clearly see, these cigarettes are open from the middle of the pack going all the way around. As a former smoker, I would never buy a pack of cigarettes that's open in this fashion. Just, you wouldn't do it. These were open for the sole purpose of selling loose cigarettes. I don't know if Mr. Farrak knows that. That is a concern. If he does not know that, you cannot open a sealed pack of cigarettes due to federal law. And as far as jurisdiction, our jurisdiction starts when you sign for a beer permit. You also sign as an applicant, as an owner of a establishment selling beer. You adhere to the laws of any criminal activity being performed on your location. You are subject to beer inspectors' uh, fines and fees from the board. So as far as question about jurisdiction, our beer permit, you're selling beer on your premises or your client selling beer on the premises, gives us that jurisdiction if there's any criminal activity that we see observed on your premises. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I have a comment, please.
No,
if you will, state your name so we know who's speaking.
I'm Qasim Faraj. Okay, I'm the manager also. Regarding the way he was talking, he say like he was open as a behavior. He was a smoker. He not open it from this way. So the cigarette is not open it for selling. Just open it to not sell, to throw it away because it's old.
So my question to the board, Mr. Chairman, this is Inspector Hardrick again, to address the board. My question to the board is, if he was opening the cigarettes not to sell them to the public, then how did I catch 4 open packs along with a pack that had been sold to the public as I was on site? And I'm done. I'm sorry.
Okay. Mr. Farag, do you have, Mr. Bain, do you or your clients have any additional comments?
No.
Okay. So now, to the board, does the board have any questions of the inspector or Mr. Bain or his clients?
Mr. Chairman, this is Chris Bellamy. I have a question, please.
Yes, sir.
This question is to Mr. Bain or his clients. Was the clerk in question, was his employment terminated because of this incident, or was this termination or departure from the business just a coincidence?
He was, I guess the way to answer that is yes and no. As you can see, he has remained adamant, and he has been adamant to the manager. And so as we were implementing these new policies and things like that, and as he remained adamant, it was just a mutual understanding amongst the parties that he would just go and do something else.
So I take that, this is Chris Bellamy again, I take it to mean that his employment was not terminated as a result of this particular incident.
It was not a termination based solely on the citation, and as I was trying to clarify, because he had maintained, I guess you would say, his innocence this entire time. Meanwhile, while we were addressing these, he decided that he was going to quit. So, there's not a termination letter or something in the file. I'm trying not to misrepresent anything to the board, but he no longer works there because of these events. Essentially, I mean, he's like, don't call me a liar kind of deal,
Right, and it sounds like your clients are pretty confident that he was telling the truth, and so that's why I wanted to get to that answer. So thank you, Mr. Bain.
Yep.
Yes, Mr. Bain, any additional questions from the board? I have a question for Mr. Hardrick. I'm not a smoker. I've never been a smoker. So seeing open packs on a counter, and I'm not an inspector either, so that doesn't really mean a lot to me. I guess my question is there witness to the physical or the actual sale of individual cigarettes? And also, as a part B to that, you had referenced a federal statute regarding cigarettes, open packaging, and stuff to that. Can you address those questions, please?
The federal law says you cannot sell cigarettes, open cigarettes, period. That is a federal law. They got a federal stamp on them. They're sealed by the manufacturer. And that comes under TCA 3917-1508 under required packaging. So a store owner or anybody who is permitted to sell cigarettes or tobacco cannot open that pack of cigarettes. They can open the carton. Carton comes in 20 to 25 packs of cigarettes. You can break that carton down and sell individual packs, but you cannot break that pack down and sell individual cigarettes by state law. So the fact that these are torn, first off, in the middle, they're torn because if you tear them off in the middle, you can conveniently sit them right there by the counter or any little slot. And as your customers come in, you just pull one out, sell them for 25 or 30 cents a cigarette, and you double your money on the pack. This is against federal law. What gives us jurisdiction is when you have a beer permit and you're breaking federal law, that's considered criminal activity under the beer permit, so we cite you also.
Mr. Chairman, this is Melvin Brown. Could I add something to that?
Mr. Brown, you have not been sworn in. If you will submit to being sworn in by Ms. Murillo, then yes, sir.
Yes, sir, I do.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am, I do. Board, Mr. Chairman and others, I respectfully submit that certainly council made some very good points, and I believe that the other inspectors and I we do understand the point that what we're citing them for is allowing criminal conduct on the premises, which is a violation of the Metro Beer Code to allow or criminal conduct on the premises. That criminal conduct would be violation of TCA 17-1508, the required packaging. And I do understand the wording. It says that it's unlawful for it to not be in its original containers, but it says to sell. So what we are maintaining, because this is not a criminal matter here, is that although there is not proof beyond a reasonable doubt that they were selling from these packages, there is certainly, in our opinion, a preponderance of evidence that 4 open packages and 1 open package with 19 cigarettes missing and 1 left creates a preponderance of evidence that they're selling those in what's normally called loosies from. So what we're alleging is that there's a preponderance of evidence that this criminal statute was being violated, and then therefore that violates the beer code. That's what we're alleging. And if our evidence doesn't meet that burden, we certainly understand. But as far as I know, it's technical, and you, those of you attorneys, understand it much better even than we do. But that's just what I want to submit. We do understand council's point, and that is also part of our reply to your question, Mr. Chairman. We just wanted to flesh out the answer to you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Any other questions by the board? So that I'm clear, I'm looking at our agenda. There are 3 alleged violations on this matter today. First is MCL 708-140C, basically a sale to a minor. The second is TCA 575301A1, state law requiring ID for the sale of beer. And then the last is MCL 708-140T, criminal activity as a violation for TCA 39-17-1508. Am I correct?
My understanding is there are two citations or two violations.
And that's what I was clarifying, because on the agenda there are three: a sale to a minor violation, a lack of ID check violation, and then a violation for alleged criminal activity, which is the sale of individual cigarettes.
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
this is Inspector Hardrick. I will take the hit for this one. Maybe I did not express clearly to staff that the ID was checked, but looking back on my paperwork, it is not notated that the ID was not checked. So I will go with the two citations of selling beer to a minor and the 1508.
Okay, so that I understand what you just said, that it would be the inspector's will to withdraw the alleged violation for ID check, for the lack of an ID check.
If I could, yes.
All right, very well. Are there any questions from the board? So, Mr. Garth, as a matter of, I guess, the legalities, or as a matter of this agenda item today, what is the best method, if nothing else, just to have it on record that the alleged violation for ID check will or has been withdrawn by the inspector, or in this case by the department, or should we as a board vote on that one individual matter to just dismiss it as a formality?
I would say that the best practice would be for the board. The board can amend the citation to just dismiss that portion of the citation, and then just do a roll call vote to amend that portion of the citation, and dismiss that particular portion of it.
Okay. And I would ask for a motion to do just that, to amend the citation in this particular matter, to dismiss the violation, the second violation on the matter of TCA 575301A1, where the law requires identification of sale to beer. Again, I would ask for a motion to amend the citation to dismiss that alleged violation.
Mr. Chairman, this is Chris Bellamy, so moved.
Motion to have a second.
This is Fox, I second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? As I call your name, I'll entertain your vote on the motion to amend the citation to dismiss the ID check violation. Ms. Jarman.
Yay.
Mr. Bellamy.
Yay.
Mr. Perlin. Mr. Perlin.
He had to leave early.
All right. Ms. Spalding.
Yay.
Ms. Fox.
Yay.
Thank you. 4 yeas, no nays. Motion passes. Mr. Bain, that alleged violation has been dismissed as a matter of part of the citation. So to the board, the remaining violations for a sale to minor and a violation for criminal activity regarding the sale of cigarettes. At this point, I would entertain, if there are no other questions, to either Mr. Bain, his clients, or the inspectors of the Beer Board, I would entertain a motion to sustain the citation or to dismiss.
Mr. Chairman, this is Chris Bellamy. I'd like to move that we sustain the citation as amended.
Thanks, Mr. Bellamy. I have a motion to sustain. Do I have a second?
A second, Bailey Spalding.
Ms. Spalding, any additional comments, questions, discussion? Hearing none, I'll entertain your motion. I'll entertain your vote on the motion to sustain the citation. Ms. Jarman?
Yay.
Mr. Bellamy?
Yay.
Mr. Pearl is no longer with us. Ms. Spalding?
Yay.
Ms. Fox?
Yay.
Very well. The motion to sustain has passed. On to penalty phase. And if I would ask someone from the board, either chief director or one of the inspectors, the staff recommendation as noted on the agenda. Can you break down what the recommended civil penalty is for the remaining 2 violations before we discuss on those merits? Because the staff recommended penalty was including all 3, but I just want to understand what the recommendation is.
Mr. Chairman, this is Melvin Brown. I would suggest that it would be a second offense, $2,500 for the sale and $1,000 for the criminal activity on the premises. But most certainly that 1,000, we would talk about it. We might have said 500. So I would just suggest the 2,500 as normal for the second sale and 500 for the in consideration of that we just have a preponderance of evidence that there's a sale and not an actual sale witnessed. So I would suggest a staff recommendation of $3,000, broken down 2,500 and 500.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Brown. To the board, is there any comments or a motion on the remaining violations on this citation?
Could you repeat that, please? It broke up.
I was just asking the board for a motion on penalty for the remaining 2 violations on the citation. I think if I may, just as a matter of not necessarily opinion, just a statement on the cigarette sales. Mr. Brown is correct that as a board, with the authority that we do have, we can do, may act at any time on a preponderance of the evidence, as he has alluded to. In this case, the cigarette sales, in the past, we have made citations for selling cigarettes that were of in a similar range. In this case, the fact that we didn't necessarily see it, was it likely happening? That's not determined here. My opinion is that this may be one of those. All right, it's more or less it's a warning, but obviously the sale to minor did occur. So I think those are issues that we may take into consideration. At that, I would still entertain a motion for penalty for the 2 violations remaining on the citation.
Do I have the ability to address that quickly?
At this point, I'll allow it. Go ahead.
Because I understand that they cited under, the Metro Code catch-all related to the 3917-1508. So if you're going to rely on the violation of the 39-17-1508, like packaging of the cigarettes, then I would think that the next section where it addresses like enforcement and penalties would also be applicable or is applicable, and that is a warning. So as to the $500 fine, you know, that's in dereliction of the statute because and we had testimony by the inspector that this hasn't been an issue or there hasn't been a citation before. So I believe that it would be a warning. That's all I would add on that, which I think maybe follows up or dovetails what you were saying.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Sure, Director.
I certainly understand where council is coming from on that matter, but our job in this situation is not to enforce criminal law. Our job is to show by preponderance of the evidence in this case that criminal activity may have been going or taking place on the premises. And so whether or not the actual criminal code suggests that there's a warning on the first one, that is not directed towards the board. That's directed towards someone who's prosecuting the criminal activity taking place. We are here to determine whether or not there's a preponderance of the evidence that criminal conduct may have been taking place on the premises. And so based upon what council said, I do not believe that that second part would apply in our situation.
Very well. Thanks for the clarification. Again, a preponderance of the evidence is what we go on. Again, I'm going to ask for a motion from the board for penalty on the remaining two violations on this citation.
Mr. Chairman, this is Chris Bellamy. I apologize for not recalling this, but what was the staff recommendation again on those remaining two penalties for $500? And
Mr. Brown had made a comment earlier that it's customary for a $2,500 citation for a second offense, sale to minor. And in this case, it was his understanding or his opinion that the violation of 708-140T regarding the sale of cigarettes is, as $500. A total of $3,000 would have been the staff recommendation once we remove the ID check. Mr. Brown, did I have that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
All right, thank you.
well, Mr. Chairman, this is Chris Bellamy. I'd like to move that we accept the staff recommendation and assess a penalty of $3,000 for the amended citation.
All right, we do need an offer, follow-up of either of an option of a suspension and or probation. Certainly a suspension, so that it is the permit holder's option to either pay the civil penalty or serve the suspension.
Understood. Away 14-day suspension.
Okay, so am I correct in that your motion is a $3,000 civil penalty or the option to serve a 14-day suspension?
That is my motion.
All right, do I have a second?
Second, this is Bailey Spalding.
Any other comments on the motion? When I call your name, I'll entertain your motion on the vote for penalty. Ms. Jarman?
Mr. Jarman left for a previously scheduled meeting.
All right. Mr. Bellamy?
Okay.
Mr. Perlin also gone. Ms. Spalding?
Yay.
Ms. Fox?
Yay.
At 3 yeas, no nays, we do still have a quorum, as there are 4 of us remaining. Motion passes. Mr. Bain, the board has just issued a citation for the 2 remaining violations after sustaining them of a $3,000 civil penalty, or your client has the option to serve a 14-day suspension. You can coordinate that with the beer board staff this afternoon or tomorrow. That is your client's choice. We appreciate you being here today. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you. You have a good day.
Thanks. Okay. The last trial today is number 44 on the agenda, Dragon Park LLC, Clementine. Who will be speaking on behalf of the beer board? Mr. Brown, will you have anything here, or Mr. Atkins, are you speaking on behalf of the health department?
Delvin Brown, I'll swear in and will speak as needed.
Yeah, and this is Hugh Atkins. I'm from the health department. Yes.
Okay, Mr. Brown, you've already been sworn in the last case, so we'll accept that. Who will be speaking on behalf of Clementine today?
Yeah, I will. Dan Cook.
All right, Mr. Cook. Susan, if you would swear in Mr. Atkins and Mr. Cook.
Right hands, please. Do you both solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, Mr. Atkins, we'll ask you to go first.
Okay. Just in general, we're under some health orders issued after the declaration of an emergency by the Director of Public Health back in March of 2020. And we are currently under amended and restated Order 12. We're in 7th amended version of that order. Up until September 1st of this year, the orders limited crowd sizes to different levels depending on the state of the outbreak. But then beginning September 1, the orders were expanded a little bit to allow for venues and other types of places that hosted events or activities to apply for approval of events at capacities higher than what the order limited crowd sizes for. So that began in like I said, September the 1st. That was actually the amended and restated Order 11 at that time was when that first went into effect back in September. So venues and places that host events started applying and having their applications reviewed by staff here at the health department. And there were different factors. The risks to the spread of COVID were considered, and they were approved or denied. And usually what would happen, even on a preliminary denial, is that they would consult with the health department and the folks evaluating the applications and get approval for fewer people than their original application, or they would change something about the event to be allowed to operate at the capacity they asked for. They may reduce alcohol sales or take out live music or something like that that would cause interaction amongst the guests and either get their capacity raised or, like I said, eliminate some risk factor and get it raised, or they would just get approval for fewer people than they asked for on the original application. And we've been in that process now, like I said, since September the 1st. Well, we had gotten complaints on Clementine through Hub Nashville even before the application process started. And when we get complaints, we reach out to the operators and explain the orders and the requirements that they're under, and consult with them along those measures, and then send out information if needed. Then we had left voicemails and sent emails to Clementine with no response. But then on September the 28th, one of the people that handled the inquiries back to the operators did make contact with Mr. Cook and informed him of the requirements of the order. We still did not receive any applications for events from anything at Clementine. And then in early December, after a weekend, it was logged in several complaints on Hub Nashville about events at a wedding at Clementine. And then on the weekend of December 19th, we had gotten a call that there was an event in progress at Clementine. And every weekend, I send out the list of approved events to Metro Police, to the Beer Board, to the Fire Marshal, to codes, several Metro agencies that work on compliance. So if they see an event or get a call about an event, they can check the list and see if it's approved. So we had got, and then somebody had called mayor's office about an event at Clementine, or the mayor's office called me that somebody had called the police about Clementine. So they double checked to make sure there wasn't an application for that day for an event at Clementine, and there was not. So the police department responded, as did, we had someone from Metro Health also responded to Clementine and found an event, a wedding party in progress, and they had more than the 8 people that were, you could have a crowd of 8 without doing an application. So they had the field notes from the police department, and also our field staff said that there were in excess, they didn't put a specific number on it, but it looked like 50 plus persons there, not socially distanced, not wearing masks. The staff, the event staff, it was noted were wearing masks. So they were found to be holding an event of more than 8 people without having applied and gotten written approval from the Metro Public Health Department. So we requested a civil warrant and had that processed, and I forwarded that to Mr. Benton McDonough at the Beer Board.
All right. Does that conclude your comments, Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
All right. Good. Mr. Cook, I'll turn over to you next, but I would first ask, as I forgot to a moment ago, on this matter before us, I would first ask for your plea of guilty or not guilty to the violation.
Well, I'm a little confused as to which way I should plead, but given that, I'll plead innocent.
We'll call that not guilty plea. Very good. All right.
Very good.
Okay. I'll turn the floor over to you for your comments or any rebuttal to Mr. Atkins' comments.
Yeah, right. So Mr. Adkins is probably familiar with my name, and he can probably attest to the fact that I am a regular when it comes to emailing and communicating with Metro Health and the Mayor's Department office with respect to the current state of capacity restrictions and other health requirements. In fact, I am one of 3 or 4 venues in the city that have been on the mayor's task force for reopening venues since the inception. So I would say that I have been intimately familiar with the regulations since the very beginning. And Mr. Atkins can probably say that I might even be considered a thorn in the side of Metro Health in terms of trying to get Metro Health to communicate, elaborate, make public the state of requirements at any given time. And I hope I don't have egg on my face after saying this, but after 2 weeks since, yep.
I'm in a.
Hello?
Mr. Cook, go ahead. Mr. Brown.
Okay.
Could you mute your, I would ask anyone who's not speaking to please mute your lines. Mr. Cook, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yep. So after 2 weeks since the mayor has announced loosening some of the restrictions in the city, the event application form that Mr. Atkins mentioned is still not live on their Metro Public Health website. So the reason I mention that is it really, I'd like everybody on this call to understand the state of not only continual change in rules and capacity as it relates to my business, but also this very unfriendly environment in terms of us really trying to manage our business. It is a fact that my business has to fill out an event application form each and every time I open my doors today. I think I'm the only business in the city that has to fill out an application to open their doors, but that's the world that I find myself in, and we are doing that each and every time we have an event these days, which is not very often. My venue business has been, as you can imagine, decimated, largely shut down by the city. So when I appear before you today to contest what is a $4,000 fine, I'm doing so with a lot of reasons behind it. But anyway, specifically to Mr. Adkins' comments, we were, after this event on December 19 occurred, where we had our first visit that I'm aware of from the Metro Health Department. And by the way, this was our first alleged violation. And let me address Mr. Adkins' comments about numerous complaints against our business. There weren't numerous complaints. I received 2 or 3 different calls from the Hub Nashville people responding to complaints. And without exception, they were complaints about events on dates that we didn't have events, or events in the future that hadn't occurred yet. So I wanted to be very clear to everybody on the phone call that this is our first real infraction alleged. So after this event, we were issued a citation by Metro Health, and we were, given a fee to pay, which we did, or I believe we've paid. And then we got this $4,000 citation from the beer board. Whether that's double jeopardy, I don't know, but the specific issues alleged here are really fourfold. One is that we did not submit an event application form to Metro Health. And as I said previously, I am on the mayor's board or committee to reopen venues. And we as a venue owner group, and I will list all the venues that everybody on this call knows in that group, uniformly believed that professional venues did not have to fill out this form, and that this form was designed for the infamous house parties that we all know about, the unprofessional venues, let's just say. That suspicion was routinely confirmed by me in discussions with Tom Sharp at the Metro Health Department. Now, whether he will stand by those conversations, I don't know, but I can tell you that it was expressed to me that we did not have to fill that form out, and that ultimately there would be a one-time form that we would complete, but Metro Health never got around to creating that one-time form. So when it was brought to our attention that, no, we now expect you to fill out this event application form each and every time you open your business, we did so. And Mr. Adkins can attest to the fact that we have been faithfully submitting that form ever since that really became a requirement. But as of December 19, I will emphatically state that was not a requirement for my business. Number two, we talked about the event size. Now, I won't bore you with an hour-long discussion about how capacity in my industry has changed week to week, month to month over the last year. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. I believe as of this date, December 19, my capacity was 75 people. And to put that in perspective, Clementine holds 800 people. So that's a 9% capacity. At that event, as Mr. Adkins said, we had 50 people. The only reason we had more people than was allowable is because we did not complete this application, which would have allowed us to have 75 people. And again, I don't believe we were required to fill out the application. Had we done so, we would have been 25 people under the 75-person cap. So were we over? I would say no. Number three, social distancing and mask wearing. And by the way, each of these infractions was a $1,000 penalty, I believe. We staff an event with one person for every 50 guests these days, which is a requirement of the Metro Health Department. I have to have one manager for every 50 guests. As Mr. Adkins said, there were about 50 guests in the building. We had one manager on site for that event. That manager was outside talking to 3 Metro policemen and the person from the Metro Health Department for probably 15 minutes before they peeked inside the building. At which time, as Mr. Adkins said, all of the caterers, bartenders, you name it, all the people working the event had their masks on. The clients who were probably eating or drinking, which is very difficult to do with a mask on, were not. Furthermore, we could not be enforcing social distancing when we're outside talking to the Metro Police people for 15 minutes. It's kind of like, a kindergarten, teacher leaving the classroom for 15 minutes. It's really, really kind of a difficult proposition. So those are the 4 points I wanted to address. But, I would say that, I want everybody on this board to know we are a professional operation. We enforce the Metro Health Code requirements faithfully. We are not a freewheeling fashion house kind of place. We have never had an infraction before. We've never had a fine leveled on us before. So you can tell that I'm a little worked up by it all.
All right, very well. Mr. Cook, does that conclude your comments?
It does.
All right, thanks. To the board, are there any questions, Mr. Atkins or Mr. Cook? Any questions at all?
This is Bailey Spalding. I just, Mr. Cook was contesting what the requirements were on December, sorry, that's my toddler, on December 19th. Can we get some clarification on that, please?
Sure, Mr. Atkins.
Yes, on December 19th, we were on fourth amended and restated order 12, which had a crowd capacity still of 8. Anything over 8 had to get an application approved by Metro Public Health. So you could get, depending on the event, up to as many as 500, depending on the risk of the event and the size of the venue. So 8 was was then and still remains the crowd size limit indoors.
So my follow-up question to that for Mr. Atkins is then what is the, you know, the I don't know if it's misconception is the right word, but where's the disconnect between what you're saying and then what Mr. Cook is saying regarding a professional venue?
Yeah, any venue, professional venue can apply for an event and get approval for more than the 8 people. And Mr. Cook mentioned that capacity has gone up and down, and it has, but you know, the spread of the virus has gone up and down. We flattened the curve back in June and reopened things, and the virus spiked again, so the crowd sizes went back down. The CDC has determined that family gatherings, funerals, weddings are riskier events, so the capacity for those things are lower. At the time of this, like Mr. Cook said, he filled out an application, most likely would have been approved for 75 people, but he did not apply, so he was not approved to have the event. The photos of the event do not show people actively engaged in eating when they have their masks off. So, you know, he had, and he was told in September that he had to apply for these events, and he did not. Now, I will say that since December 19th, as Mr. Cook has said, to my knowledge, he has applied for every event and gotten approval for those events since that time. So he did begin submitting the events as per the order after this incident.
Okay. Then Mr. Cook, since your name has been invoked multiple times, I'll offer you the opportunity to respond.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So first of all, I was told, or it was just stated that I was told in September that I had to apply each and every time we had an event. I was not told that. I was not told that. And I had numerous conversations one-on-one with the Metro Health Department and was repeatedly assured during that time that there would be a one-time only form that we as professional venue owners would complete. So all of the venue owners that were participating in the mayor's committee of venues to reopen venues were in the same boat as my venues. They were not applying at that time either. They were told the same thing by Tom Sharp and Metro Health Department. Subsequently, a one-time only event application form did come out, but it applied only to hotels. Metro Health Department decided for whatever reason that venues would no longer have a one-time application process, but that they would be subject to an each and every time application process. We found out about that after December 19. Now all of us as venue owners in town are applying, and we're doing it, as Mr. Adkins says, religiously. But I will say that the 50 people we had at this wedding represented a 5% capacity of my venue. Social distancing for 50 people in 7,000 square feet of indoor space and 3,000 outside is pretty darn easy to do. And, you know, I think we do a very good job of running a pretty tight health, ship when it comes to COVID requirements. Metro Health has photos of all the signage that we put out and all the, the protocols and whatnot. So, I don't think that that's the argument. Mr. Adkins knows we've been a good actor ever since, and that this was really a misunderstanding. I don't believe he would say otherwise.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, a couple of things. The one-time event application was for events that are doing the same thing pretty much all the time. And while weddings seem similar, weddings were, no matter where you have a wedding, even at a hotel, you would have to fill out an application for that. Another thing, I serve on the mayor's hospitality advisory committee on reopening. Those business leaders that are on that participate and fill out applications appropriately. I don't know what this advisory committee Mr. Cook is talking about is, because he's not on this advisory committee that the mayor put together that I'm on. So I'm not sure where that information is coming from. I think a couple of other things. I think I spoke with Metro Legal, and Mr. Cook had mentioned earlier our citation to him. Apparently that's still in a negotiation process, and Mr. Cook didn't indicate for sure what the status of that was, but that I think was heading toward a settlement, but it has not been completed yet. And I think that was what Mr. Cook wasn't saying one way or the other, definitively understand on the status of that. But the thing about it is, even if Mr. Cook was under the understanding that a one-time application for an event was coming, he would have still, even the companies that are now using the one-time application, had to fill out individual applications up until that application was developed. So he would have still, he wouldn't have been exempt from filling out an event application, because in the future, we hope to have an application that would be more streamlined for people conducting the same type of conference event every time. So, and I'll drop back to just, weddings again, the CDC has identified those as riskier events because people come in, they think they know they do know each other. I know it's a tough thing, weddings and funerals during this time, but I think the health department made it clear that events needed an application. Earlier, Mr. Cook said something about being a thorn in the side of the health department. We don't look at it that way. We understand these businesses are under constraints. They've done a good job of helping out with the reduction of the virus by reducing their capacities and working with us, and we appreciate that. I know it's a tough time for them. So we get lots of calls from lots of business leaders, and we don't consider any of them to be thorns in the side of the health department. They're trying to get the information they need to operate, and we appreciate that they're checking with us to get that.
Okay, and Mr. Cook, I'm going to give you one last opportunity to make any comments before we move
Yeah,
on.
yeah, quick. I'd like to comment on a couple of those points made. Number one is Mr. Atkins was referring to the Hospitality Commission. I am not on that, and I agree with that. That's not what I was alluding to. But I've been brought in by the mayor with a couple other leading venue owners in town in a roundtable format for him to meet with us and discuss our ideas and where we're going. And when I say I'm on a select group of venue owners in the wedding industry, I am. And I get calls from the mayor's office routinely. Is that a formal process? Perhaps not. And it's certainly not the commission that he's referring to. So that I did not mean to be misleading there, but we're certainly one of 3 or 4 venues that the city relies upon for the pulse of our industry. Number two, Mr. Atkins makes the compelling case that, well, weddings are different each and every time. Therefore, we have to fill out an application each and every time. That was not the understanding. And I can recall specifically a conversation I had with Tom Sharp at Metro Health, where he made that comment. This is probably in late December, early January, after the alleged infraction. And my comment to him at that time was, no, weddings are all the same. They all have the same food. They all have the same alcohol, and we have the same protocols in place. So they are actually very, very similar. And Mr. Sharp's response was, well, wait a minute, there's one variable that changes each and every time, and that's the number of people that attend. And I said, yes, that is in fact true. However, that is also true for hotels, and you have given them a one-time only application submittal. And that obviously ended the discussion, right? and I made my case. So again, the point is once this really became known, and we were not informed in September, we were required to do this, but once it really became known, all of the leading venues in town started applying. And it was really in late December when that happened.
Okay. Hearing all the commentary, are there any questions from the board of Mr. Atkins or Mr. Cook? If there are no questions, my next request would be a motion to sustain or to dismiss the citation.
Mr. Chairman, this is Chris Bellamy. I'd like to move to sustain the citation.
This is the second Bailey Spalding.
I have a motion to sustain and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll hear your vote on the motion to sustain when I call your name. Mr. Bellamy?
Yay.
Ms. Spalding?
Yay.
Ms. Fox?
Yay.
3 yeas, no nays, motion passes, citation is sustained. Moving on to penalty phase. I want to make a comment before I request a motion on this to staff, to director, or to the director or the staff. In this case, there was a citation issued for $4,000, which was in essence a $1,000 fine for $1,000 fine for each of the 4 violations alleged on this evening, and now sustained by the board. To me, that seems severely incongruent with a 7-day suspension. It will come to no shock or surprise to anyone on this board or to staff that I'm not, nor have I ever been a fan of multiplying violations that occur simultaneously. So to that, I'm happy to hear from staff if there's any comments as to me, what is a pretty incongruent application of a civil penalty amount versus an option on the staff recommendation of a 7-day suspension.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Please.
The $1,000. Are you guys getting any feedback?
Yes, a bit. So.
Okay, sorry. Just want to say that the $1,000 per violation fits within the prior precedent that the board set earlier this summer, and then earlier last summer. I'm sorry, with the first cases that came before the board pertaining to the health order. The 7-day suspension and 30-day probation also goes along with the prior precedent of a first-time violation.
All right, thanks. I'm probably going to disagree that it's the precedent because the early ones weren't. As folks in the community and we included in that, we're just figuring this out. So I don't necessarily agree that it is the precedent for the early violations because those were quite different. Nevertheless, I am open to a motion on penalty from a board member.
Well, it's been sustained, right?
It has been sustained, yes, Ms. Fox. Looking for a motion on penalty.
This is Chris Bellamy. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we administer a civil penalty of $1,000 and or a 7-day suspension followed by a 30-day probation.
All right, I have a motion for $1,000 civil penalty or the option to serve a 7-day suspension followed by 30-day probation. Do I have a second?
This is Fox. I'm going to second that.
Very well, I have a second. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, I'll entertain your vote on the motion when I call your name. Mr. Bellamy.
Yay.
Ms. Spalding.
Yay.
Ms. Fox.
Yay.
Thanks. To the board, I have 3 yeas, no nays. Motion passes. Mr. Cook, the board has sustained the citation issued to you. And as a result of that citation being sustained, they've issued a civil penalty in the amount of $1,000, but it's to your discretion. You may either pay the $1,000 and continue to operate accordingly, or you may serve a 7-day suspension in lieu of paying the $1,000. And again, that is at your discretion, and you can communicate with the beer board staff in I would say the next 24 to 48 hours at most. I'm assuming that staff will be in touch with you. Mr. Cook, thank you for being here today. Mr. Atkins, thank you for being a part of today's meeting. Are there any questions, Mr. Cook, on that?
No, I think we're set.
All right, very well. Again, thanks for being here, Mr. Atkins. Thanks for being a part of today's meeting. We apologize for the length. Sometimes it happens. That's the last trial on today's agenda. Mr. Director, that concludes my part of the meeting.
And
I'll turn it over to you.
thank you, Mr. Chair. Due to the length of time, I'm going to waive my report, and I will send that to the board members.
All right, very well. Are there any other comments from the board? Again, I want to thank everyone for being a part of today's meeting. It was quite lengthy for a day meeting, again, which we generally do not do. But having said that, your time is very much appreciated. Unless there's any objection to adjournment at 2:14, folks, we stand adjourned. Thanks so much. Have a good evening.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Thank you.